a follow-on meeting to our meeting from last week, meeting 17. We'll kick off, we'll continue our discussion from the meeting we had on the 30th. And again, we're holding today's meeting via webinar. And before we get started, I'll hand it over to Farah Anderson from Cadmus to go over our meeting procedures. Farah.
Great. Thanks, Sarah. So welcome, everyone. I know everyone's familiar, so we will be quick and direct here. But to ensure that we have another smooth and productive meeting, just want to briefly go over our logistics. The first is, of course, to remain on mute when you're not speaking to limit background noise. And we will also, on the tech team, help with that to ensure that members are muted. Join us on video if you are able. And the slide that should come up here. Yep, there we go. Should indicate where you can do that. To ask questions and share your thoughts, please use the raise your hand function to indicate you'd like to speak and be called upon. Once you are done speaking, please go ahead and unmute yourself or mute yourself following your comment. In the event of roll call votes in today's meeting, we'd want to move through that smoothly and would be calling on members in alphabetical order, placing your vote saying aye or no. And finally, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us directly at nys.cac@cadmusgroup.com. All right, and with that, I will hand it back to Sarah and the co-chairs.
Thank you, Farah. We'll now turn to the roll call to see which members of the council are in attendance today. So can I ask NYSERDA's Valerie Milanovic to call roll?
Sure, thanks, Sarah. Co-Chair Harris?
Good morning.
Good morning. Co-Chair Sagos?
Morning, folks.
Good morning. On behalf of Commissioner Ball, Brian Steinmuller?
Yes, good morning.
Donna DeCarolis?
Good morning.
Morning. On behalf of Commissioner Dominguez, Ron Epstein?
Yes, and the commission will be joining us momentarily.
Okay, great. Gavin Donahue?
Good morning.
Morning. I'm going to ask for Dennis Elsenbeck, although I don't believe he was available, but just in case. Dennis Elsenbeck? CEO Falcone?
Good morning.
Good morning. On behalf of Empire State Development, Vince Ravishir?
Good morning.
Morning. Just in case she became available, Rose Harvey. Chair Christian. Bob Howard.
Good morning.
Good morning. Peter Iwanowitz, he may be late, but just in case he's on.
Yes, good morning. I'm here. Sorry,
Oh, good morning.
a minute or two late, but I'm here
Missed
now.
you in the tech check.
Yeah, I know. Sorry, I'm here.
That's okay. That's okay. Chancellor Malatras? CEO Driscoll?
Yes, I'm here. Good morning.
Great, good morning. On behalf of Commissioner Reardon, Yvonne Martinez?
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. Ann Reynolds?
I'm here, yes, hello.
On behalf of Secretary Hughes, Keisha Santiago Martinez?
Good morning, everyone.
Morning. Brian Salter?
Good morning, here, thank you.
Paul Shepson?
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. On behalf of Commissioner Wisnauskas, Rebecca Kepnick? On behalf of Commissioner Bassett, Henry Spletoff?
I'm here. Good morning.
And I think Rebecca is on, it just might be in the wrong cyberspace, so we'll catch up with her. Given that, Council co-chairs, I note the presence of a quorum for today's continuation of the Climate Action Council meeting.
Great. Well, thank you, Val, and good morning, everyone. I do, on behalf of Commissioner Sagos, want to thank you all for making the time on short notice to reconvene again today. Certainly, as we head toward the end of the year, I particularly appreciate your flexibility and your willingness to spend the extra time needed to review the draft scoping plan and your feedback thereof. We are, as said, reconvening here today because we did not have enough time to get through our agenda from November 30th, and namely the council discussion portion of some of the feedback that was provided and identified by the members as important to discuss. So per your feedback today, we've laid out the agenda to focus the discussion on the areas that were identified by members as areas for discussion. And these items include, first, the topic of leaving analysis of consumer rate impacts to subsequent implementation processes. Second, adding a gender lens to climate justice. Third, the use of moratoria in the land use chapter. Fourth, local government. And fifth, transportation. So those are the primary topics that we'll be covering today in this 2-hour meeting. Before we kick off with Sarah in the lead, I would like to turn it to Commissioner Sagos to provide some additional comments that I believe are ripe for discussion. Basil?
Doreen, thanks. And I'll be on for the whole meeting, but half of it, I'm going to switch to my phone. So it's a bit of an experiment to see if that'll work. Just a quick update for you all on some DEC activities. So this week, I encourage you all to look at our environmental notice bulletin. We'll be putting out 2 really important documents that pertain to climate. These are is a revision to Commissioner's Policy 49, which, as you know, or some of you may know, governs some of our work on climate, as well as a new Division of Air Policy set of documents. And very importantly, as you know, that CLCPA Section 7.2 requires agencies to consider whether permits and other administrative decisions are consistent with the targets and the goals of the CLCPA. So that's what we're doing with these 2 documents that we're posting online, embedding CLCPA into it. The CLCPA also requires and recognizes the importance of disadvantaged communities at Section 7.3. We have another Commissioner's Policy number 29 that will be putting some work into and putting out for the public comment soon, so keep an eye on that. But really, these documents are meant to hold DEC accountable. We put them out for public comment because we want to and we should. So we want you to weigh in on it and look at it. But ultimately, these will be tools to help us do our work here and set expectations for the regulated community on things like permits and other administrative decisions. So again, Wednesday, environmental notice bulletin on our website. And we'll take public comment on that. Of course, the final will be when we can get the final done. But we've already, as you know, I think you've seen some of our decisions. We've already been holding ourselves to this standard, but now with some more certainty. But that's all I wanted to say, Doreen. Thank you.
Well, thank you. That's an important milestones. I'm glad we had the time today to make them known. So next, I believe Sarah Osgood is going to pick up the agenda and walk us through the items that I just described. So Sarah?
Thanks, Doreen. That's right. We'll take them in the order that you indicated. So if we can go to slide 55, please. The particular item that was raised for discussion is the second item that will be listed here. It's regarding affordability and the analysis of consumer pricing impacts. So while the integration analysis has shown the economy-wide costs of the strategies to reach the Climate Act's goals, it doesn't include or it doesn't model the ratepayer impacts. Any specific proposal would require a specific analysis to determine the ratepayer impacts. And so that analysis would be developed as part of any subsequent implementation processes. We had some points made by a couple members that they wanted to discuss this one further. I think in particular, Donna DeCarolis had raised a concern here. And so at this point, I just want to, I'll go ahead and open it up for discussion of the council members that would like to make comment on this strategy or this approach.
Sarah, could you just clarify what you mean by this approach? What in particular are you looking for comment on at this exact moment?
Sorry, I meant the approach of indicating that so the comment was that we should include energy affordability and consumer pricing impacts within the draft scoping plan. I'm trying to explain that the integration analysis that does provide the overall economy-wide costs, it doesn't actually get to the ratepayer impacts. And in order for us to get to the ratepayer impacts, you need to have specific details on a policy. And since we are not at that level of detail, what staff is recommending as a proposed resolution here is that the specific ratepayer costs would be identified as part of a subsequent implementation process. And so at the last meeting, there was a concern raised that this wasn't sufficient, or that there was some discussion wanted around this. And so I was asking for the feedback in relation to the proposed resolution, to, essentially saying that we cannot at this point in time include ratepayer cost impacts of every particular policy that's included in here. And Donna, I do see that your hand is up. I'll call on you now.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Thanks, Sarah. And thank you for raising the issue again. And I think what caught my attention is that, to wait until implementation to analyze cost impact seems too late. And I understand that maybe you don't have it right now for the scoping plan. So I think, maybe suggestions could be that some scenario analysis be done. And maybe that can be done, in the coming, months and the early part of 2022. Some analysis that would do this kind of assessment as a variety of scenarios for each of the customer classes, residential, commercial, industrial. I mean, it's just something that I think we've seen and had a lot of discussion around the importance of affordability, reliability, and resilience. And, there's just some really specific recommendations that could impact affordability. I don't think we fully assessed that. And that's really all I think that's just something we've continued to discuss, and a suggestion could be that there's some scenario analysis that's done for it.
Thank you, Donna. Gavin?
Just real quickly, I support everything Donna just said. I guess I would just amplify one point. There's a lot of recommendations in this report. Some are more impactful for some members than others, but there is known data out there. There are recommendations in this report that the cost associated with a recommendation is known. We know today what a heat pump costs. There are things dealing with other recommendations that I would be readily admit that we maybe don't know the cost today. But where we have recommendations that NYSERDA, the PSC, can determine the actual customer cost, I think that should be analyzed and be part of the scoping plan. And without that, I think it's a real incomplete report and a disservice to the public. So I don't mean to be redundant with Donna, but I do think where we know costs, they certainly could be articulated in the draft. Thanks.
Thank you, Gavin. Raya?
I just wanted to add, I, as somebody who's a consumer advocate, and I'd love to see our industry friends on the side of the advocates more often. This is a critically important analysis that is also, just like our disadvantaged communities analysis, the job studies, there is incredibly robust cost and impact analysis that is happening. And this is another piece of sort of, parallel analysis that is happening. I, of course, would support cost impact analysis to the extent that it is possible at this point. But what I certainly would want to see in any, any of these analysis is also sort of how will this be done? Because that is something, better coordination between agencies. Like, I think there are a lot of macro efficiencies that, we can pick up here. It's really unclear to me how we rush this type of analysis in the next week. But I am 100%, and I would think it's very sufficient to have the PSC look very, very deeply into this issue with the focus on affordability, and macro efficiencies that can be captured. And that I think is critically important. And it's another one of these critical pieces that I'm not sure can be done correctly, in the next week or so. With this added, something else that I'd really like to see would be an update from the Climate Justice Working Group on the disadvantaged communities definition. Where are we with that? And how that parallel piece can be also, if we could get an update on that at some point at the next meeting would be fantastic, and how that's going to be wrapped into the plan as well.
Great, thank you, Raya. I think in terms of the disadvantaged communities definition that and where we are with the criteria, that was an item that we were planning to include on the December 20th meeting agenda. And so if it works for the co-chairs, I think we could commit to that. Doreen, Basil?
Yeah, sorry, just, am I off mute here? Sorry.
Yes, I can hear you.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, I certainly agree fully that should be part of our agenda for December 20th. We need to understand and update and further the progress that's been made over the last series of months. So I agree on that. If I could jump in on the question of costs, I think there is a related challenge that we have with respect to this request because of the fact, or of this topic in general. Maybe Carl Moss, if you're on, you could jump in here, but it is also the case that we have not yet resolved the question of who would ultimately pay for some of these initiatives and or policies. And by that, I mean, we've had many discussions about, of course, the fact that this isn't all going to fall on ratepayers. This isn't all going to fall on New York State taxpayers. Ultimately, there will be private market involvement at scale. That's part of our goal, of course, and the reality we're seeing. But also, federal involvement is increasingly critical for us to gain from as a state. So, with that said, I think one of the related challenges we have, if we were to work toward the objective that Donna and Gavin provided, is simply the fact that we not only have to analyze the costs themselves, but also the question of who is paying is a related challenge with where we sit today in fulfilling some of those requests. Carl, would you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, sure. I think I'll be repeating, much of what you and Sarah said, but I can just try to make it, I'll say it one more time, which is, we were able to analyze for these technologies and these system changes what the incremental costs would be to society. As Doreen said, you need to have specificity. Is it going to be a ratepayer program? Is it going to be a tax credit or incentive? How much is the federal government going to weigh in and help to buy down some of that cost? Without those type of programmatic specifics, we can't actually analyze the how much individual parts of our society pay. But we do think it's really important to have articulated what the incremental costs would be and what the benefit cost analysis is, which is what we've done. And again, I hope people don't walk away thinking that waiting for implementation means it's somehow kind of a done deal at that point. I mean, at that point is when we see the specific policy proposals that flow from a scoping plan. And that's when we can continue to debate and discuss how we implement these. Back to you, Sarah. Sarah, you're on mute.
Sorry, I'm victim of the double mute. Thank you, Carl. Ann Reynolds?
Thanks, Sarah. I just put my hand up to make a suggestion, I guess. Not disagreeing with anything that everyone else said. Maybe the solution is something in the middle. I mean, this language here that says for ratepayer cost impact, we anticipate that any analysis would be developed is a little bit wimpy. I mean, maybe what we need to say is We've done a societal cost impact because that's what we can do now for the following reasons, XYZ, what Carl just said, why we can't, and the who that Doreen said. But that the council recommends that when these recommendations reach the point of specific proposal, like say if it was the ZEV mandate, once it's going from a recommendation to a regulation, that we recommend that there has to be a specific ratepayer assessment at that time. And that would be something a little bit more assertive than this, but would also acknowledge that until we know when and who and what exactly the reg would be, we can't really assess it. An example would be, we've done that for 70 by 30 because there's a commission order that put that in place. We haven't done that for 100 by 40, but it is a recommendation of this plan and also required by the law. But then when they're doing the order, they would have to report to the public exactly what the ratepayer impact would be. Just a compromise suggestion, I guess. Call it that.
Thank you, Anne. And I saw, I believe I saw Donna's hand go up.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. And I guess all I would say is just to add to this conversation, I think what's missing, and I know we all agree on this, is maybe the true consumer potential cost impact. I think we understand that the policies haven't yet been determined and we don't know who's going to pay, but there could be, consumers could be paying for some of these very specific recommendations around electrifying heat, with dates certain included. So I think that's the part that I don't think can just wait. And as was discussed, many of these things, we do know a range of costs, and understanding that maybe we don't know yet how they will be paid for, if there could be federal money, which of course that'd be great. But the cost of transition, I think, just needs more consumer focused analysis. So however we best accomplish that.
Thank you, Donna. Raya, did your hand go back up?
Yes, just that I'm supportive of Anne's, Anne's proposal.
Thank you, Raya. So could I ask if there are any members that are not supportive of Anne's proposal? Perhaps what we could do, maybe the revised staff proposal, is to make it, to make clear that that any, as kind of the policies get more well formed, that every policy should have an assessment of ratepayer or of consumer impacts at that point in time, kind of as early as possible. And that perhaps we can also work over the next year to try to include more material for the final scoping plan that helps get at some of the cost items. For instance, I've heard Gavin and perhaps Donna even say, maybe, are there other ways, even if we can't get at a true ratepayer cost, are there other ways that we can demonstrate cost through cost studies or something like that? Would there be any objections to taking that approach on the cost piece here? I'm looking, Paul, I see your hand is raised.
I just wanted to make a comment that we should, I think we should be sure to state that once the policies are identified, that what will be incorporated is a complete cost benefit analysis. That is, the document will not simply focus on ratepayer costs without the full cost benefit analysis.
Good modification. Donna, your hand is up, and then Gavin. Donna, you might be muted.
Go ahead.
I understand how we're trying to move the ball forward here. I totally get it. Sarah, I hear what you said. In principle, I guess I don't have I have a concern about costs. I've made that very well known throughout this process. I'm just going to reserve my right on how I feel about it until I see the language. I think a lot of that, what consumer costs are, how we deal with industrial customers versus residential customers, I think all these things are critically important and the words matter. So for me, I'm going to reserve judgment on the cost part of this until I read what the staff comes up with.
Understood.
Yeah, and I was going in the same direction, Sarah, so thank you. Really, I was trying to understand if that suggestion would include things like electrification of heating. Is that considered a policy? I'm not sure. So I think it would be important to see the language and reserve comment.
Got it. All right, thank you. Are there any more comments on this particular item?
Sarah,
Peter,
this
that
is
sounded
Peter
like
Wallen.
you.
Sorry, I'm having trouble with my raise hand feature today. I'm not sure why. But I just want to uplift. I want to uplift something that I think Paul Shepson said just now, and maybe just ask him to clarify on it. But if we also can talk about the economic benefits of the consumers, I mean, everybody sort of wants to talk about cost, but the economic benefits of consumers are pretty significant. And I'll just give a quick example. I mean, if you look at internal combustion for motor vehicles versus electric drive, I've said this in past meetings, and I think it's bear saying again, we have to have an honest discussion about how inherently inefficient internal combustion is in the transportation sector. You're just not going to get efficiencies out of a combustion engine beyond what we have now. And when we're literally wasting 3/4 of the amount of money that people put into a gasoline tank or a diesel vehicle versus, an electric vehicle, it has to be part of the discussion. Everybody wants to focus in on what's this going to cost the consumer, but part of an honest discussion has to be the economic benefits to more efficient ways of moving people between point A and point B, and more efficient ways of heating and powering building systems. So I don't know if that was what Paul was getting at. If not, he can correct me, but that's critically important to an honest discussion.
May I clarify, although there's not much clarification needed. Agree with what Peter said, and I just think it's really important that the scoping plan presents an overall and in specific cases a balanced analysis of benefits and costs. If for the policies we strictly focus on ratepayer costs, that introduces a bias in the document for those members of the public who are reading it. So it's just really important to present the overall analysis of, the integral of benefits and costs.
And to the point I was making before is that we have to think, and I'd be very interested to see how that analysis is put together, because it needs to capture these macro efficiencies that, Peter and I think Paul are both alluding to. That we're going to be substantive whole-scale changes that are intended to really move us forward and save money.
Thank you. Tom Falcone?
I just wanted to add two quick thoughts on this. The theme has come up, electrification of heat, a few times, and we've done some work at that on that particular topic on Long Island. And just to give some background on some of the complexities, first of all, I fully support that it should be a benefit and a cost analysis. But even when you get to cost, some of the work that we've done that's preliminary, because it depends on assumptions of how much use, for example, rebate air source heat pumps or ground source heat pumps. And on Long Island, we've been rebating ground source heat pumps and encouraging that for more than 20 years. And we have very aggressive programs to rebate air source heat pumps. And when you say, what's the impact of the customer? I mean, the customer bill for their electric bill is almost certain to go up because they're using a lot more energy. But then on the flip side, their oil heat bill or their natural gas bill goes down. We've looked at unit costs because there's a variety of ways to look at this. So as you use the electric grid more efficiently, because right now it's very much a summer peaking utility, as you spread the kilowatt hours across the year, it has the tendency of paying for itself, the build out of the grid on a unit cost basis. So now we have customer bill impact, electric bill goes up, but other bills go down. we have unit cost basis, and that all assumes some mix of policies in there. How much are we rebating the customer? How quickly does it happen? What other complementary policies are there? So I just flag in general that there's going to be many, many different ways to look at this. But at least on Long Island, even at today's natural gas prices and oil prices, there's a huge benefit to moving to electrification. You know, the discussion seems to assume that rebate or that customers are going to be worse off. About 40% of Long Island customers use oil heat. And if you move those oil heat customers to an air source heat pump, it saves them a ton of money. And that's today. We also found that moving customers on new construction, you know, the savings, the cost savings of not building out the natural gas system in that new residential building, as well as the electric savings, heat pumps are much more efficient, you know, more than pays for itself. As you go down and you project what this is going to be over the next, 20 or 30 years, you have to make future forecasts of natural gas and oil prices. But even today, hugely beneficial. So my point is that we should definitely take into account costs and benefits. And don't be surprised when the analysis comes out something like that there's actually significant benefits to customers, even on a dollar basis. Their electric bill may go up, but their overall fuel bill may go down. On a unit cost basis on electricity, I wouldn't be surprised at all to find that it does not put an upward pressure on rates. It actually tends to use the grid more in a more balanced system. But these are all things that are based on initial analysis here at Long Island. And, we certainly need to study it more. But I just figured I would add what I know about at least one part of the state.
Thank you.
That was fantastic. And just adding that just even a smarter, more efficient electric grid. It was already 10 years ago when I worked with Environmental Defense Fund, and we looked at California and just the smallest amount of being able to, peak shave, then huge financial benefit. I mean, there's so many ways to look at this, and I think that nuanced presentation from Mr. Falcone was very helpful.
All right, thank you. And just recognizing the time here, we probably want to wrap up and go on to some other topics, but I see Bob has had his hand raised for a little bit here.
Yeah, just briefly, if I could, I want to say I very much agree with what Ann and Raya, Paul and Peter have said. And I put up my hand because I wanted to augment what Peter was saying about the efficiencies of electric vehicles compared to fossil fuels. And exactly the same thing is true for heating. So I also appreciate what Tom just said. One gentle correction, he actually said at one point that when you switch to heat pumps, you use more energy. And what he meant to say, I think, is more electricity. Your total energy goes down incredibly. And that's why the emissions, of course, are going down, plus the fact that we're substituting in the renewable electricity. But
That's correct, Bob.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to highlight that because it's exactly the same case. Beneficial electrification applies equally in the heating sector and in the transportation sector. I also just, from a personal standpoint, I'm sitting here in my house today. We put in a ground source heat pump to pull our oil furnace out 7 years ago. And it's an 1890s farmhouse, so a fairly expensive retrofit. But the retrofit will be paid off completely in a year from now. And from then on, my savings will be huge forever into the future. And I learned a lot. I could redo my house now at half the cost that I did. So I think the economics, particularly for oil and propane, are huge. And as Tom said, even for natural gas, the financial advantages to customers, certainly in new construction, but probably in retrofits, are also big. Thank you.
Thanks, Bob. I do see we have Gavin and Donna, both with their hands raised. Would you like to make a final comment before we move off this topic?
My final point is I agree with Bob and I agree with Tom. I mean, right, my initial point, and if you go back to the comments I put in on a draft council study, on page 5, we mentioned cost scenarios. Tom Falcone just laid out a scenario that obviously is well known to the state of New York. The Public Service Commission approves rate designs for all the utilities across the state. This information's out there. Bob's information is important to this discussion. So that's what I'm getting at is not just customer bill impact, but the overall scenario of what these things are going to cost long term. And my suggestion is that there is data out there that could be used, and the state is at this point is not entertaining it as part of our report, and that is troubling to me. So thank you.
I would just make one correction, Gavin. This is public information, but it was compiled by LIPA. It wasn't part of a PSC proceeding. As you know, LIPA is has a separate board and isn't subject to PSC regulation, but the material is out there.
Yeah.
Donna? You might be on mute.
Sorry, thank you, Sarah. Now I'm doing it. Yeah, just to echo what everyone else has said, I agree with the analysis that we need to do. And I think, Tom, I appreciate the data that you talked about. We have data for our region. National Grid has provided data, I think through the utility consultation group. I think it really lays out the importance of looking at different regions, because we all have different analysis for different regions. I mean, we're cold here and have a very high degree of natural gas usage, so it's a very different analysis, but that is analysis that we should be doing and comparing. So support that kind of analysis. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So the next item up for discussion is on slide 96. We could go to slide 96. And this relates to climate justice, and I will ask Maureen Leddy from DEC to describe this element.
Thanks, Sarah. Very good discussion there on the previous point. It was raised in the last meeting about this feedback point on a gender lens, adding a gender lens to the draft plan. I believe there was some small level of discussion, some support in the chat. We just wanted to state for the record, we feel the council's position on this point of feedback is to incorporate it into the draft plan. So we're, perfectly willing to do so and happy to do so, unless we hear differently from the group today. I believe that was the only open item for discussion.
Do any council members want to weigh in on this item? I'm not seeing any hands up just yet. Raya?
Thank you so very much. I'm just weighing in. I heard that it sounds like that's the position, unless there's anyone who opposes. I certainly don't oppose, but I just want to, I want to thank everyone, common sense ad, and, thank you so much.
Great, thank you, Raya. Paul?
I just want to comment. I thought that we discussed this last time, that if anyone is opposed, raise their hand. At least that's the way I remember it. But I don't think doesn't seem like there's any opposition, and we can move on.
Agreed. We just wanted to be transparent for the record and the public that that there was a positive declaration here to move forward with this piece of feedback.
I, for one, am highly supportive.
Great, thank you. And so with that, not seeing any other hands, let's move on to the next item. The next item on the list was slide 86, and it relates to land use. I'll turn it over to Sarah Crow from Department of State.
Okay. Yeah, I'm on.
Sorry, 86. Slide 86, please. Yeah. And this was, I think, on the two moratorium items.
Oh. Okay, so this was on the second and third bullet. So this was, we had some discussion about this. I think that on the last call, but the comment was about the length of time it takes for about the challenge of permitting, I think, of permitting sort of fossil fuel uses while comprehensive plans and zoning are sort of getting up to speed with the Climate Act. And we talked about adding a recommendation to assist localities in putting moratoria in place while they update their comprehensive plans and their zoning. That's the third bullet. The second bullet was more about deforestation, and I think as you can see here in the bullet, there was someone had suggested a moratorium on deforestation for the purposes of renewable energy. Well, that seems not sure that really could be carried out in if we are to meet with, you know, in a full-on moratorium in order to meet our and we really couldn't put a full moratorium in place if we need to meet our climate goals at the same time, but we suggest having the language that you see here, which is in some cases this that we suggest or rejecting state subsidies and tax credits and all when deforestation is suggested. So I guess those were the two. I mean, they're related. They're different moratorium comments, but I don't know if anyone wants to comment on one or the other, or we should take them separately.
Anne, I think you had raised concern on the moratoria. Do you? And I see your hand is raised. Do you want to speak?
Yeah, I just have a question. So the second bullet here is about a moratorium on deforestation for the purpose of renewable energy.
Exactly.
But the third bullet is a moratorium on what?
The third bullet is a moratorium on any fossil fuel infrastructure, so gas stations, tanks, new, I think, could be extension of fossil fuel infrastructure. But anything that the idea here is that communities can, you know, municipalities have land use control, so they can allow or not allow those types of uses. But it takes time to change their own regulations and their own land use. So this would be a moratorium. This would be support for municipalities to adopt moratoriums as opposed to a state moratorium.
So I guess I'm limiting my comments to the first bullet there. I mean, I can go along with the resolution. It's a funny way to say it about the state subsidy tax credits and recs. I mean, if what you're talking about is prohibiting, you know, I think what you need to say is we need to build renewable energy and there's some incompatible land uses, but we're balancing whether it's in a forest, whether it's in a wetlands, whether it's an endangered species habitat, whether it's in farmland. Like, I think that's the answer to this concern, is that this question should be addressed in the avoid, minimize, and mitigate framework of either SEEKR or ORES, the Office of Renewable Energy Siting, and it's an issue that should be addressed, but it should be addressed in that framework, which already is happening. That would be my suggested resolution, and maybe that just is a tweak to the language you have here.
Yeah, I think that's pretty consistent with what we. I think that's quite clear. I think that is consistent with what we have. Thank you.
Bob, I see you have your hand raised.
Yes, thank you. I want to weigh in on the third bullet. I strongly support the idea of encouraging local governments to have moratorium, but to be honest, perhaps I just read it quickly, but I didn't make the connection that this was specifically to fossil structure until Anne just added that clarifying thought. So I would suggest a little addition there where we specify with regard to fossil fuel infrastructure. Since the other bullets are not on that, and they specify that it's, you know, deforestation, it's renewable, whatever, I think here we should specify that this is with regard to fossil fuel infrastructure. But I strongly support it.
Yeah.
Thank you, Bob. I saw Raya had her hand up as well.
I've got a question that is somewhat related and just what Anne was talking about sort of regulation made me think of it. And where are we with specificity on the plan for the consensus recommendation for the DEC to establish enforceable emissions reductions from power plants, and I presume perhaps other sources? That's what made me think of this. I guess we'll, and to the extent that it's a process I'm not aware of, that you may be one of the ones Anne referred to. Where are we with that piece? That's my question.
Jared, can you give us an update on that?
Actually, I think this is a question about the electricity chapter and what that says on the subject. So I think Sarah, maybe, is there anything you can say in response?
Sure. Okay. So so you meant with respect to the recommendation on the fossil fuel generation. So the recommendation that's in the current draft is the consensus. What was the consensus recommendations from the power gen panel? So on that particular one, it's that there would be, it's not recommending a moratorium, but it's recommending a process to establish, for DEC to establish the regulations similar to similar to what they did for the peaking units.
Oh, thank you for answering and it was a majority, but not consensus on moratorium. All right, thank you. I don't want to take this on a further afield, but thank you for clarifying.
Donna, your hand is up.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. Just another question, I guess, around the third bullet in the moratoriums. I was struggling to understand why a moratorium would be necessary if since the CLCPA already requires agencies to consider consistency with the CLCPA requirements when they issue permits. So given that that's a requirement, I wondered why this was necessary.
I think this is related more to municipal permitting, and I think you're right that ultimately, of course, both states and localities are. I mean, the state agencies certainly have to, are obliged to consider consistency with the CAC or the CLCPA. But this is more related to municipal actions, so to align municipal actions with both the CLCPA and allow them to get ahead of potentially requests for permits coming in while they're trying to get their land use regulations consistent with the CLCPA and with the goals stated here. So it just keeps them ahead of the game and avoids potential conflict between municipalities having to issue permits and the CLCPA. But you're right that this is not related to state action, state agencies, because state agencies are separately required to be consistent with the goals.
Bob?
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to raise a related issue. I've had a few members of the public who are involved in local planning boards and zoning boards, et cetera, point out to me that the current seeker guidelines that they're using don't reference the CLCPA and aren't entirely consistent with the CLCPA, that there's nothing in there about greenhouse gas emissions, for instance. And so I would urge that we urge DEC to update the seeker form, and that would help local governments get behind the CLCPA also.
Yeah.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you.
Gavin?
Thank you. I guess my issue is the language. If this is about municipal permitting and we're not going to recommend a moratorium on the electricity side part of this report, I think this language needs to be much clearer about what we're talking about. Because the discussion of a moratorium raises a lot of concern for a lot of folks. And I also think it has to have some sort of nexus back to the state of New York and the state permitting and the jurisdictional issue there about state permits. So maybe it just needs more connection, but I am encouraged about what you said earlier about the electricity sector and not having a recommendation of a moratorium. I think that makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Thank you, Gavin. Tom Falcone.
I just thought I'd share our experience on Long Island. We've had lots of projects that, for example, solar projects. And I think everybody can support that cutting down a mature forest is not a good trade-off. However, in actually getting projects built, there frequently are opportunities or circumstances where you may have a sod farm or a golf course or some large piece of land that would be great for solar. However, it may require, in order to get access to the transmission grid or something like that, that there is a small portion of a property that needs to be, that has trees on it. Maybe they're not mature trees, that need to be cleared to make it the whole project work. So I would just caution that, in all of these circumstances, there's a lot of gray area. And I think if you were to look at the facts on a project like that, probably most people would say, yeah, the benefit is clearly for green energy in that case, but in this other case, where we're clear cutting a mature forest, this is not an appropriate choice. I would just say that you have to be very fine-tuned about the language you adopt, though, because you could end up having a situation where good projects go by the wayside.
Thank you, Tom. I think that's a good point. I think that's exactly why the recommendation here is not for the moratorium, but more for a balanced approach. So I think that's a very good point. Thank you.
Peter Iwanowitz, your hand is up.
Yes, thanks. Got my hand raised feature fixed. Thank you, tech support, whoever did that. So maybe I can just provide a little bit of context because, I know that was the mini session I was part of. We were talking about this interplay between, what's happening at the local government level and what we're going to be contemplating at the state level. And I think our climate action plan, our scoping plan should really articulate what I think the draft does right now is it talks about the key role that local governments are going to play in terms of land use decisions, zoning, permitting. And I think we should be articulating that the scoping plan should anticipate that the state will be very proactive. And I know the state's being this, but very proactive in terms of decisions that are before the state that could make our job harder if local government hasn't yet updated ordinances or zoning or plans. And so we should encourage, the issuance of building moratoriums so that local governments can true up their local zoning, adopt comprehensive plans and do other things. But the state should also be sort of looking at decisions that are before them that could impact our ability. And I'm going to use gasoline stations as a clear example. In many instances, towns just sort of have to accept the fact that new convenience stores want to build more gasoline stations. Why? I don't know. Topic for another discussion. But they're hemmed in by local zoning that allows for these facilities to be continued to be instructed. So in this case, and using this as an example, the state should reject any registration request for underground storage of petroleum at these new facilities. That's a clear way that the state can take action to help local governments prevent the build out of more fossil fuel infrastructure that is already a stranded asset, but just becomes more stranded with new stations. So just to add a little bit of granularity, I think we should be looking at the plan with an eye towards ensuring local government success and stopping, decisions where the state has the ability to stop those decisions now, while local government chews up their local ordinances and plans to be in alignment with the CLCPA.
Thank you, Peter. I understand Rebecca Kopanek has also been raising her hand. I can't see it, but Rebecca, go ahead.
Thanks, Sarah. I just wanted to ask on the second moratorium that we've been discussing. I want to just get clear on what we mean by infrastructure and if this includes extending new gas lines to newly constructed housing.
It would include anything that would fall under the purview of local government land use decisions. So if it's that may or may not, depending on whether it's, I mean, that's more of a building code than a zoning land use decision.
I think we would want to proceed cautiously if that's potentially something that could be regulated, because that could be a very NIMBY reaction to some new affordable housing being built that the local government doesn't appreciate.
Yeah, I think this is more about new and about land use specifically, land use types.
Okay.
I see that Peter Iwanowitz and Tom Falcone have their hands raised, but those might be legacies. Okay, great, thank you. So not seeing any additional hands raised. Sarah, you feel like you've got what you need from feedback from council? Great. So let's move on to the next item. I think we just had 2 items left. The next one was on local government, and so we'll turn to slide 89. I don't think there was a specific element that was mentioned here. I think Anne might have had a question that came up, but then her question was answered in the presentation. But Peter, you had also mentioned this was an area where you wanted to make a couple comments. So Peter, I can turn it over to you.
I just did attended to that in my last comment, but thanks.
Okay, all right, great. Okay. So, Anne, if you don't have so perhaps this is not an item that needs to be raised then. All right, so then moving on to the final item that we had, that would be slide 71, transportation. Peter Iwanowitz, I believe you also put this on the table for discussion.
Yeah, I wanted to sort of go back to something if Jared and I think the commissioner, co-chair Segos raised during the last call. And I think the scoping plan needs to get a little bit more specific on a couple of things. First is the commitment by the state to electrify the state fleet. And I know that there's been made in pledges, but if we have a specific executive order, or are we recommending that statute be passed to memorialize that the state will lead? I think there's been a couple of counties that have taken this action, Albany, Westchester, and Suffolk, if I'm not mistaken, who have said we're going to move in this space. But we should put that plainly into this scoping plan so that people understand what government's going to be doing to lead to electrify its fleet. That would be, I think, extremely helpful. And I know that the draft that's before us now relies heavily on the advisory panel recommendations. And I just really feel like I don't think the draft fully incorporates and appreciates the significant concern that the Climate Justice Working Group had with things like biofuels in the transportation sector, cap and trade type of programs, specifically TCI. And I think we should probably do a little bit of job of sort of explaining that if we envision some type of biofuels in the transportation sector, for what and for how long, that would be really important, because we've talked about it and Carl has sort of laid it out that they only see it as a very specific niche. We should just be clear on that, on a push to full electrification of how long we think that's going to be. And then there's clear places, and this might get into the sort of the economy-wide approach, but it doesn't seem like the Transportation Climate Initiative is a viable pathway forward anymore. So we should just be clear about that, as a sector-specific, cap and trade or cap and invest type of program. It just, I know we reference that in the transportation sector, but it, with the states pulling out of it, it just doesn't seem like it's a viable pathway forward, and we should recognize it as such.
Okay, hey Peter, thanks for that input. I just want to point out that I don't believe there's any recommendations in the chapter about joining TCI. That was basically deferred to the economy-wide section, which I recognize you haven't seen a draft chapter on yet, but recognize your point about the viability of TCI now that the sort of leading states are no longer proceeding it at the moment with TCI.
Yeah, I guess that was my point, Jared. It was, the advisory panel sort of had that piece, and then the climate justice working group, rejects it, and so have the states. So it shouldn't bleed into our economy-wide approach then.
Yeah, and you'll get a draft of, shortly that includes the economy-wide discussion. But yeah, no, we hear you.
Yeah, I don't know if there was anything further that we wanted to enumerate in the scoping plan about the state's commitment to a fleet and what we should be doing with local governments. But with local governments leading now, it seems like the scoping plan should commit to, dates and dates certain. If that isn't the plan, we should have it in there somewhere articulated.
Yeah, we'll put in the dates, that have been, identified already. Which are 2035 for passenger vehicles, 2040 for medium heavy duty.
And is that an executive order, or is it just as a commitment that's been made?
At this point, that's a commitment that has been made, where New York joined a number of other jurisdictions globally in making that commitment.
Right. Okay. Well, we should have it in lights front and center. I think it's a good commitment. We should lead by example here with the scoping plan.
Any other comments on transportation? All right, I'm not seeing any additional hands up, so that brings us to the end of the items that were remaining for discussion. So happy to turn it back over to the co-chairs to wrap us up.
Sarah, can I just ask one general question before that? At our last meeting, a commitment was made to try and get us the new information on air source heat pumps versus ground source heat pumps before our final Climate Action Council meeting, if at all possible. Is that still something that we could hope to see in the next few days to a week?
Carl, can I ask if you're able to respond to that?
I would be happy to. Could you restate the question?
Yeah, just at our last meeting, I had pointed out it would be nice to see the analysis of the ground source heat pumps versus air source heat pumps in terms of overall electric needs, peak winter needs, things of that sort. I know you're working on it. You'd indicated we might be able to see it before our very final last meeting, and that would be great if that's still possible. So I'm just
yeah. So we are working to try to bring that forward. And I don't have any specific update right now, but we will do as best we can to accelerate that one.
Okay, appreciate it. Thank you.
Yep.
If I may ask, thank you so much for that. I'm looking forward to that too. And if I may ask Sarah, and this may be something that the co-chairs plan on discussing, but the other piece that we weren't able to get to last time was a sort of a richer discussion on process and next steps. And so I just hopefully we'll be able to get a bit of that today. Let me then.
Sarah, Doreen, with your permission, I have to switch to my iPhone, so I got to sign off with this. I'll be right back on. Yep.
Sure, certainly. Happy to take this time to talk about whatever details, Raya, that are not clear as to our next steps. I think this is, Sarah, if I am sure, this is the same slide we had last week, right?
That's correct. None of the slides have changed.
Yep. Okay, so we've made no changes to this schedule, Raya, which contemplates our next milestone being the resubmission of the draft scoping plan with as per requested the changes. We're going to highlight the changes, right, Sarah, in the document so that
correct.
people can quickly see where changes have been made, which will then be followed by the next Climate Action Council meeting on the 20th. Now, during that meeting, I believe, Sarah, one addition we've discussed today is just the inclusion of representatives of the Climate Justice Working Group to provide the latest at that meeting, right?
That's correct. And I think we also heard that there might be additional, the job study, the final job study, a report out on that at the meeting on the 20th as well.
Got it. So we'll add those to the agenda on the 20th. But the plan on the 20th, Raya, is to take the formal vote as to, you know, where the members stand as to the release of the draft scoping plan, which again isn't a vote as to the content per se as much as is a vote to make it available for others for feedback in the coming year, according to the comment, you know, requirements that are part of the act. I would say we've talked a lot about lots of things we need to do next year. Perhaps that's something you wanted to cover, but I'm happy to pause and see if you had particular points that you hadn't gotten answers to, Raya.
As you predicted, some questions about next year, but thank you very much. That seems pretty clear.
Okay. I think it'd be fine if other members have general questions, Sarah, given the schedule. I'm happy to take them. If you have questions, just raise your hand, and if anything in particular as to the schedule isn't clear, I'd like to discuss that as well.
So, Doreen, one question: between the 10th and the 20th, you are willing to take comments and edits, or are we supposed to save it up for the 20th? And maybe you've said this, so I apologize. Just clarifying what we should do between the 10th and the 20th.
So I can jump in here if that's helpful. So of course, there will be new pieces that you'll see on the 10th, including the economy-wide strategies chapter. And so we would encourage council members to reach out to me to let me know if there are items that are, I guess, after you receive the revised draft on the 10th, if there are additional items that you have concerns over or you want to discuss more at the December 20th meeting, we could certainly do that. While obviously, ideally, it would be great if everybody, you know, if we can get the draft to a place where the council members all feel comfortable with kind of what's in that December 10th draft, that would be great to kind of take a vote on the 20th and get it right out there. But I also could see a path where if there are, you know, any other important changes that council members feel that we need to get in there, that we could, you know, potentially vote on the condition that those, you know, if something, you know, were to come up, that we say that will explicitly be, you know, worked its way into the plan before it gets issued for public comment. So I guess kind of a long way to say, yes, you will take any kind of feedback that you have on the plan when we get out the revised document to you. But obviously, as we're trying to wrap up the plan for the end of the year, you know, we're hopeful that this is going to come very close to hitting the mark for you members. Donna, I see you've got your hand up too.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. Just a quick question. I see that it looks like we're going to talk about this at the December 20th meeting, but the public comment period and the public hearings, is there anything you can share about that today? You know, what our current thinking is of what to expect for next year? Is it too soon? Should we wait for the 20th?
So it's a little bit too soon, but I will say we're just in terms of kind of the stuff that we're trying to determine is, you know, kind of the sequencing. We often do public comment periods, or the state will often hold a, you know, public comment period coincident with when they're holding the hearings. So we're just trying to work out kind of some of the logistics of that. We know that there will be a minimum public comment period of 120 days and that we need to hold at least 6 public hearings. In terms of kind of organizing those public hearings, we'll likely be doing it. We've got to figure out if they're going to be in person or not due to kind of COVID restrictions. And then I think what we were hoping for is that we'd at least have a few of the members of the council able to sit in and listen in, at least on some of the public hearings, but not necessarily, you know, making it a requirement that you sit in on all of them for the full time. And we're also looking at, you know, are there other mechanisms other than just kind of the written comment period and the public hearings that we might want to engage in? So we've talked about the speaker series. I think we'd be looking at potentially continuing that on specific topics if members would find it helpful. If there's specific targeted outreach, you know, we could look at that too. Generally, the public comment period, public comment hearings would just be generally open to anybody that wanted to come and kind of make a comment, and not necessarily topic specific. But if we wanted to hold any topic specific type meetings, we could. So we're going to be putting a little bit more meat on the bones in terms of current thinking and options going into next year. And we'll be, you know, certainly discussing that at the December 20th meeting and looking to get council member input to ensure that we have kind of the most successful public comment session that we can.
Thank you. That's helpful. Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. That was everything that had been on my mind with respect to points to communicate. I would ask members, to Sarah's point, though, if you have thoughts as to how to best effectuate this stakeholder outreach strategy, we'd welcome them. COVID notwithstanding, we are certainly interested, I think we all are, in as broad a dissemination of this and the feedback thereof. So if you have thoughts on how to do so in a creative manner, we'd welcome it.
Raya, it looks like your hand might be up.
I just wanted to raise my hand to respond to Doreen. I think that sounds fantastic. Certainly have a lot of ideas. Just really excited to be able to engage with communities and stakeholders about this plan. And you may have said this, I know you're still thinking about it, but I know the statute has the minimum of 120 days, but is that something that we could even, you know, contemplate, is sort of giving ourselves more time to get feedback from folks? And I love this idea of having different, maybe topical forums, et cetera. And yes, I'm happy to respond with additional ideas about how we can do this, and also how I can help as a council member.
I think in terms of, sorry, in terms of the duration of the public comment period, I think that's completely up to the council to, as far as I understand, there are no limitations on how long we could hold it for, the public comment period. Of course, I would just say we want to make sure that we have time to process all of those good comments and kind of figure out how we want to incorporate them into the plan. But by the end of, you know, the 2022, but other than that, I'm not aware of any limitations on the duration of the comment period in terms of cutting it off
Yeah, I thank you for that. I think my concern would be is that I mean, it's wonderful that we're on time, but if we sort of drop something on January 1, we're kind of, we're losing some time just in that, in that January time, just in the first instance. So would be an advocate for seeing if we could get some more time, and interested in others' thoughts on that too.
Yeah, it's a really good point, Raya. I don't want to overcommit, but I think we'll come on the 20th with a concept, and why don't we see what you all think of it. I have a few ideas, but I should save them for that date.
I'll just add, I agree with Raya. I think like 6 months of public comment and 6 months to fix the plan in response to the public comment might work out well. But
Looks like we've exhausted the raised hand, Sarah, unless I'm missing one. So I think with that, I will say thank you again for coming together a second time on this topic, and I know we'll be meeting again very soon. But in the meantime, please reach out if you have questions or thoughts. And you just have my thanks for your time today. And Sarah and the state team, thank you for arranging this discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So much.
Thank you.
Thank you.